Welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping straight into a brief, beautifully written, and honestly highly conceptual piece of writing today.
Yeah, it really is beautiful.
It's by Jaime Hoerricks, PhD, and it's titled The Geometry of Meaning: 5 Dimensions of Coherence.
Which is such a striking title right out of the gate.
Right, okay, let's unpack this. The text is framed as this, well, it calls itself a field-first account of language, presence, and retroactive understanding.
A bit of a mouthful, but we'll get into exactly what that means.
Exactly, because we're essentially setting aside the traditional linear ways we usually analyze communication. Instead, we're exploring a much more elusive question for you today.
Right, the real mystery here.
Yeah, how do we actually make sense of the world? And maybe more importantly, when do we make sense of it?
That question of when is really the central mystery we are exploring today for you. Because, why does coherence, that profound, unmistakable feeling of everything finally clicking into place, why does that often arrive only long after the moment that actually created it?
Which is so frustrating when you think about it.
It is. We are conditioned by society to view communication and understanding as this instant linear exchange. The assumption is always that comprehension should occur precisely at the moment of experience.
Like, you hear the words, you understand the words, boom, done.
Right, but this deep dive directly challenges that assumption. We're going to examine the actual timing of meaning and dissect that deeply familiar and honestly often unsettling feeling of being completely out of sync with your own surroundings.
And Hoerricks starts this whole exploration with a really fascinating phenomenological observation.
A very grounded one.
Yeah. The text introduces the idea of a specific quiet that arrives after intensity. And just to ground this for a moment for you listening, think about the immediate aftermath of concluding a massive, months-long project at work.
Or even just the strange sensation of waking up on the first morning after a highly chaotic, emotionally taxing week.
Exactly. But how does the text explicitly define this post-intensity state? Because it's not what you'd expect.
No, it's crucial to look at the exact phrasing Hoerricks uses here, because it deliberately avoids all those usual cliches of, finding deep peace or sudden stillness.
Right. No Zen meditation metaphors here.
Exactly. The text explicitly notes that this state is not silence. Quote, never silence.
Never silence.
Instead, it's described as a thinning of noise and a clearing. You haven't gone deaf to the world, and the world hasn't stopped moving around you.
The gears are still turning?
They are. Rather, the overwhelming chaotic frequencies that were demanding your immediate survival instincts, those have just dropped away.
Yeah, the text notes this transition occurs when the lights dim, when the calendar turns, and when obligations loosen their grip.
That distinction between silence and a thinning of noise feels incredibly accurate to the human experience, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's like standing in a crowded room when the loud music suddenly cuts out.
That's a great way to put it.
You still hear the hum of the refrigerator, the murmurs of people talking, the ambient reality. You're just no longer overwhelmed by that primary blasting frequency.
And Hoerricks refers to this resulting space as the soft suspension.
The soft suspension. I love that phrase.
Me too. And what's fascinating here is what actually happens within that soft suspension. Because human nature might lead us to assume that when the noise finally thins and the obligations loosen, we just immediately sink into a state of profound relief.
Right, like finally taking a deep breath and relaxing.
Or conversely, that we crash into a total crisis, having run on pure adrenaline for so long.
The classic post-vacation sickness.
Exactly. But Hoerricks observes something entirely different. The text states that in this suspension, something surfaces, but it's not crisis and it's not collapse.
It's strangeness.
Quote, strangeness first.
Strangeness first. That phrase captures something very difficult to articulate. You finally have the space to breathe, and instead of feeling grounded or relieved, you just feel a profound sense of weirdness.
You feel totally off.
Yeah. And the author goes on to define this strangeness as the sensation of being slightly out of phase with the world.
Out of phase.
So how does this concept of being out of phase operate in the context of the essay?
Well, it borrows heavily from wave mechanics, actually, but it applies it to human consciousness.
Okay, wave mechanics, lay it on me.
Think of it like this. When two waves are out of phase, they're traveling through the exact same medium, but their peaks and troughs are misaligned. Their timing is fundamentally off.
They aren't syncing up.
Right. So in terms of lived experience, it means you are physically present in your environment. You're sitting at your desk, you're interacting with your family, navigating your daily routine. But your internal rhythm, your actual cognitive processing of that reality, is misaligned with the external world.
You're just out of sync with the dominant frequency of the room.
Precisely.
And there is a real meta-awareness to this in the writing, which I found so striking. Right in the middle of exploring this out-of-phase sensation, Hoerricks inserts this incredibly brief line.
Oh, I know the one.
Quote, "I have written this before."
It's such a powerful moment in the text.
It really is. It's a very quiet acknowledgement that this feeling isn't a singular glitch in the matrix, it's a recurring cycle.
It speaks to the inevitability of the experience. We cycle through periods of intense noise and obligation. We eventually hit the clearing, the soft suspension arrives, and then inevitably we are greeted by that exact same strangeness.
We realize we've been in this exact emotional and cognitive space before.
Right, feeling entirely disconnected from a reality we technically belong to.
Which leads perfectly into one of the most evocative descriptions in the piece. Hoerricks writes about feeling, and this is a quote, "misplaced, marooned on a shore I recognize but cannot inhabit."
That imagery is incredibly potent.
You know the shore, but you are a castaway on it.
It captures the specific cognitive dissonance of this state. Think about the spaces you know best in your life. You can walk into a room, recognize every single piece of furniture, know the exact dynamic of the people sitting there, and possess all the factual data about your environment.
You have all the data.
But yet, in that moment of soft suspension, you feel fundamentally alienated from it. You cannot inhabit the space you perfectly recognize.
The internal key simply isn't turning the lock of your external reality.
That is exactly it.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. Tying back to the title, The Geometry of Meaning, Hoerricks gives us a structural metaphor for this exact feeling of alienation.
The axis metaphor.
Yes. The author describes this out-of-phase sensation as being organized for an axis no one else appears to be using.
It is a brilliant way to conceptualize the friction of human disconnection, because it means you aren't malfunctioning.
Right, you aren't broken.
And you aren't devoid of structure. You are highly organized. But your cognitive alignment, your axis, is oriented to a completely different dimension of reality than the people around you.
You're looking at the z-axis while everyone else is on x and y.
Precisely. When you are oriented to a different axis, your fundamental parameters for what matters, what is actually being communicated, and how to process the environment are entirely decoupled from the group. You are existing in the exact same physical coordinates, but you are navigating a completely different geometric plane.
So the communication breakdown isn't necessarily a failure of intellect or empathy, for that matter. It's a structural misalignment.
Exactly.
You're reading the depth of a room while everyone else is merely reading the width. But moving beyond the feeling of this misalignment, the essay pivots to map out what Hoerricks calls 5 dimensions of coherence.
The core framework.
Right. And while our excerpt focuses on the overarching theory rather than listing out a syllabus of those 5 specific dimensions, it does introduce the heavy mechanics of how this restructuring actually works. We see 3 major concepts introduced here.
Yes, gestalt cognition, relational language, and retroactive understanding.
Those are the big 3.
This is where the text transitions from a phenomenological observation of a feeling, that strangeness, into a rigorous framework for how the mind actually processes reality.
It gets structural.
Very. These 3 concepts are essentially the engine of Hoerricks' theory. They represent a fundamental shift in how we need to view human comprehension, moving completely away from the idea that understanding is an immediate transactional event.
Okay, let's start with gestalt cognition. We often hear gestalt used casually to mean, perceiving the whole pattern instead of just the individual parts.
Where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly. But how does this specific type of cognition rely on that soft suspension and the thinning of noise we were just discussing?
Well, gestalt cognition in this context isn't just a matter of stepping back to see the forest for the trees. It's the realization that while you were frantically navigating the individual trees during the intensity of an event, your brain was actually secretly mapping the entire forest the whole time.
You just didn't know it.
You couldn't know it. You couldn't access that holistic map because your cognitive load was entirely consumed by immediate survival and linear processing.
You're just trying to get through Tuesday.
Right. It is only when the noise thins, when you finally enter that clearing, that your mind has the bandwidth to project that complete map. The gestalt, the total coherence of the pattern, can only manifest in the quiet aftermath.
That fundamentally changes the way we should look at our own moments of confusion.
How so?
Well, if you are overwhelmed in the middle of a crisis, or even just a highly complex negotiation at work, you aren't failing to understand the situation, you're just gathering the data points.
Exactly.
The actual understanding, the gestalt, is a secondary process that requires the noise to drop first.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Hoerricks is directly contrasting two distinct modes of existing here. The text argues that certain profound experiences do not unfold in what is termed linear speech.
Linear speech.
Yeah.
Meaning standard chronological time.
Yes, linear speech is the baseline of our society.
Mm.
It's chronological, sequential, one word or action strictly following another in standard time. But the text proposes that true coherence unfolds in field and meaning time.
Meaning time. That implies that meaning operates on its own temporal physics entirely separate from the ticking clock on the wall.
It really does.
So how does meaning time practically change the way an event is experienced?
It introduces the concept of cognitive latency as a feature, not a bug, of human consciousness.
A feature, not a bug.
Right. In linear time, you endure the event. You process the raw inputs. But in meaning time, you actually synthesize and comprehend the event. And Hoerricks' core thesis is that these two timelines rarely overlap perfectly.
They're out of phase.
They are out of phase. This is the absolute foundation of retroactive understanding. We simply do not always understand what is happening while we are experiencing it in linear time. The true coherence of an event, the moment its architecture finally makes sense, arrives entirely after the fact.
So we have the experience on Tuesday, but the actual coherence of Tuesday might not arrive until Friday night.
Or perhaps years later.
Right, years later, when the lights finally dim and the gestalt can form, you have to look backward from your newly organized axis to see how the geometry of that past situation actually fit together.
Exactly. Consider the profound implications of this. Think about a major life transition you've gone through, perhaps leaving a long-term career or moving to a new city.
Oh man, moving is the worst for this.
It is. During the transition, you are likely operating entirely on linear speech signing papers, packing boxes, having immediate tactical conversations with movers or realtors.
Pure survival mode.
If someone asked you in the middle of it, what does this mean for your life? Any answer you gave would be fairly shallow because you hadn't entered meaning time yet.
You couldn't possibly know.
It is often only months later, sitting quietly on a porch in that new city, completely out of phase with the initial intensity, that the retroactive understanding hits you. The meaning was always there, it just had a delayed arrival time.
That framing completely relieves the pressure of needing to have an immediate epiphany every time something significant happens. It reframes confusion as just an expected delay in transit.
It's very validating.
It is. But if meaning is constantly arriving on a delay, how does relational language, which is the third concept mentioned, function within this delayed framework?
Relational language is the mechanism that bridges the gap between the linear experience and the retroactive meaning.
Okay, how does that bridge work?
If understanding arrives late, then language cannot just be a simple tool for immediate labeling. A word spoken during the intensity of an event doesn't contain its full meaning in that exact second.
Because the gestalt hasn't formed.
Exactly. Instead, language forms a relational web over time. The words only gain their true, robust coherence when they are later related to the quiet that follows and related to the broader field of the gestalt map.
So it's all connected in retrospect.
Communication becomes an ongoing, unfolding process of alignment, rather than a one-off data dump.
It sounds like Hoerricks is saying that a conversation is never truly over when the talking stops. The words just sit there suspended, waiting for the listener's meaning time to catch up and actually assemble them into coherence.
That is precisely the mechanism. And it highlights a massive friction point in modern society.
What?
We live in a culture entirely obsessed with immediate processing.
Hot takes, instant reactions.
We demand real-time reactions, instant debriefs, and hot takes the second an event concludes. We expect immediate coherence. But this text suggests that demanding instant meaning is fundamentally at odds with how our cognition actually maps complex reality.
It forces a fake coherence.
Yes. True meaning defies that immediacy. It requires the clearing, it requires the strangeness, and it requires the delay of retroactive understanding.
So what does this all mean? We've traced a really compelling arc here today. Hoerricks takes us from the very visceral, almost heavy physical sensation of the aftermath, that specific thinning of noise and the clearing it creates.
The soft suspension.
Right. And from there, we explored the deeply alienating, yet totally universal sensation of feeling fundamentally out of phase, recognizing your surroundings but being organized for an axis no one else in the room is using.
Marooned on a familiar shore.
And finally, we saw how that isolation isn't a dead end. It's actually the necessary precursor to gestalt cognition and retroactive understanding. It is the waiting room for meaning time.
Which raises an important question about how you, the listener, evaluate your own moments of disconnection. There is a profound validation in Hoerricks' framework. When you inevitably find yourself sitting at your desk or in your home, feeling that strange suspension and entirely disconnected from the dominant frequency around you, you aren't failing to engage with reality.
You're not broken.
You are likely just shifting axis. A lack of immediate understanding in your daily life does not equate to a lack of meaning. If you are feeling misplaced, it might simply indicate that the linear event has ended, but the coherence hasn't arrived yet.
You are just waiting for the wave to finally reach the shore.
Give yourself the grace of meaning time.
Which leaves me with a final thought I want you to take with you and explore long after we wrap up today. We've spent this time discussing how our own understanding of our lives, our choices, and our experiences only arrives retroactively, often on a significant delay.
A necessary delay.
Yes. If that is a fundamental truth of human cognition, what does that mean for our societal systems that constantly demand immediate apologies, instant accountability, or rapid-fire debriefs?
It's a great question.
If coherence truly takes time, are we constantly forcing people to confess to or explain a reality they haven't even cognitively arrived at yet? It completely challenges the timeline of justice and interpersonal conflict. Take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you next time.